Mercedes' offer for Max Verstappen has just been leaked. Want to know the brutal terms of the contract? Then this video is for you. Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. Mercedes has crossed the threshold from rumor to reality, and in doing so, they've launched the most audacious, explosive, and paradigm-shattering move the sport has witnessed in decades. What was once whispered in hushed tones behind the scenes has now erupted into an earth-shaking confirmation that is reverberating throughout every corridor, paddock garage, and executive suite in the Formula One world. The Brackley-based powerhouse has officially submitted a formal, verified, jaw-dropping offer to Max Verstappen, a proposal so colossal in scope, so overwhelmingly stacked in benefits, that it has instantly redefined the upper limits of what a Formula One driver can command. No longer a speculative fantasy, this is now cold, unshakable fact. Mercedes has effectively torn up the rulebook and set fire to it, throwing down an offer worth a staggering €130 million per season in guaranteed salary alone, an amount that does not merely surpass existing contracts, but completely obliterates every known precedent. It renders past deals obsolete, dwarfs the likes of Hamilton, Alonso, and Schumacher in their prime, and elevates Verstappen to a tier of financial and sporting power never before granted to a driver in the modern era. Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. But the salary, though monumental, is merely the tip of the iceberg. This is not a standard employment agreement. This is a hyper-personalized empire-building arrangement, meticulously crafted to offer Max Verstappen far more than money. The contract reportedly includes complete commercial autonomy over his own personal branding, allowing his logos, image rights, and marketing initiatives to be prominently featured not just on his race suit or helmet, but directly on the car's livery itself, an honor never before extended to any driver in Mercedes' illustrious history. It's a shift in philosophy. It's a signal that Mercedes is no longer playing the long game. They want dominance now, at any cost, and they are willing to hand over not just financial resources but brand control to the one man they believe can guarantee it. Included in this high-voltage proposal is a personal fleet budget that extends to a fully funded private jet allowance, with aircraft access guaranteed year-round for personal and professional use. It doesn't end there. Mercedes is reportedly offering Verstappen a post-retirement lifetime role as a global brand ambassador for Mercedes-Benz, ensuring his legacy is forever intertwined with theirs, on billboards, in commercials, at galas, corporate events, and even the development of their future vehicles. Most jaw-droppingly of all, he's being offered equity, real high-value shares, in Mercedes' forthcoming electric racing division, which insiders say will become the next centerpiece of their long-term motorsport strategy. In essence, this is not just a contract to race. This is an invitation to become a stakeholder, a partner, a co-architect of the brand's evolution beyond Formula One. And then comes the plot twist that no one saw coming, a move so incendiary, so emotionally charged, that it has thrown the entire F1 ecosystem into a state of utter chaos. George Russell, the heir apparent to Mercedes, the supposed cornerstone of their post-Hamilton era, is being sent in the other direction. As part of the terms, Russell will leave Mercedes and head straight to Red Bull Racing, stepping into Verstappen's current role if the deal is accepted. The implications are almost too massive to process. This is not a future strategy. This is not a long-term plan. This is a live grenade thrown directly into the heart of the driver market. It's not just shocking, it's revolutionary. No team swap, no driver deal, no talent trade in recent memory has come close to matching this level of shock value, financial muscle, and sporting disruption. The ripple effects are immediate, brutal, and impossible to ignore. Every team principal is now on high alert. Every driver manager is making urgent calls. Every executive with a stake in the 2026 engine regulations, sponsorship alignments, or media rights deals is now reassessing everything. This isn't just Mercedes pushing the envelope, this is Mercedes shredding it and rewriting the playbook in real time. The power dynamics that have long governed the sport, who controls talent, who dictates market value, who decides brand influence, are now in freefall. Red Bull, Ferrari, Aston Martin, McLaren, Audi, all of them have been pulled into the gravitational shockwave of this titanic maneuver, and none of them will walk away untouched. Fans are stunned. Social media has erupted. Commentators, analysts, and insiders are scrambling to decode the strategy, the timing, the consequences. What happens to Red Bull's internal dynamics if Verstappen leaves? What does Russell's arrival signal for the reigning champions? How will this impact Sergio Perez, Toto Wolff's leadership, Lewis Hamilton's legacy, and the long-term vision of Formula One itself? With just a single contract offer, Mercedes has forced the entire motorsport universe to reconsider its assumptions, re-evaluate its hierarchies, and reimagine its future. Verstappen, once the hunted, is now the most sought-after asset in the history of the sport. And should he say yes, the aftershocks won't just reshape the driver market, they'll permanently redefine the balance of power in Formula One for the next decade. Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. Nothing like this has ever happened. Nothing this bold. Nothing this personal. Nothing this strategically nuclear. Mercedes hasn't just made an offer. They've detonated a warhead in the middle of the grid. And now the entire F1 world holds its breath as Max Verstappen, arguably the most dominant force on the track today, weighs the most consequential decision of his career, a decision that could alter the course of Formula One history in a way no one thought possible. What's unfolding behind closed doors within the Red Bull organization is far more complex, volatile, and deeply personal than the public narrative ever allowed itself to imagine. For years, the image of Max Verstappen as the golden child of Red Bull racing, fearless, fiercely loyal, relentlessly fast, has masked a darker, more festering undercurrent. His loyalty, it turns out, was conditional. Conditional on trust, on respect, on being heard. And somewhere along the way, those pillars began to crumble, slowly at first, then all at once. The real story, buried beneath layers of public statements and polished interviews, is not simply about a driver growing restless. It's about a man who feels betrayed not just professionally, but personally, by the very people who once vowed to build a dynasty around him. The first signs of this breakdown were easy to overlook. A few passive-aggressive comments during media rounds. A subtle lack of warmth in post-race interactions. A visible coldness in briefings. A tightening of the jaw during debriefs. But insiders now reveal that Max Verstappen's discontent didn't begin with headlines or public controversies. It began in rooms without cameras, during meetings where the walls echoed with tension, in moments of silence that said more than words ever could. And at the heart of that rupture was not just Christian Horner, whose leadership has long been the face of the Red Bull empire, but a deeper, more entrenched conflict that reached into the roots of the organization, into its Austrian core, into its philosophical DNA, into the very culture that Max once believed in. According to those with direct knowledge of the situation, Verstappen has grown increasingly alienated not only from Horner, but from Helmut Marko, the man often credited with discovering and shaping him into the driver he is today. Their relationship, once based on mutual ambition, has reportedly devolved into something resembling cold warfare. What was once constructive tension has transformed into open disdain. Max, who has matured into not only a driver but a leader, expected to be taken seriously when offering technical insights. Instead, he found his contributions met with dismissiveness, with skepticism, and in some cases, outright contempt. He began to see Marko not as a mentor, but as a roadblock, a man whose grip on the team's developmental direction was no longer sharp but antiquated, reactionary, and ultimately damaging. And the rift didn't stop there. Multiple sources close to the situation describe a growing faction of executives on the Austrian board who, in Max's view, prioritized politics over performance. They were, as he allegedly described them in private, suits with zero racing instinct, individuals more concerned with maintaining their personal fiefdoms than evolving the car or empowering the people on the front lines. Max's frustrations were not born from ego, but from a profound sense of being intellectually dismissed, of having his data-driven feedback routinely swept aside by individuals who lacked the credibility to challenge him in the first place. This wasn't about fame. It was about faith. Faith that his voice mattered, that his obsession with detail and perfection wasn't being wasted in an echo chamber of boardroom apathy. His trust in the team began to disintegrate after a series of critical flashpoints. One of the most significant reportedly took place following the Brazilian Grand Prix, a weekend marred by questionable strategy calls, suboptimal setup decisions, and internal friction that bubbled just below the surface. Verstappen had, according to insiders, submitted a highly specific set of upgrade requests weeks prior. Recommendations grounded in telemetry, simulation data, and comparative analysis with competitor development trends. Yet when the new parts arrived, they bore little resemblance to what he had advocated. Worse still, when he inquired about the divergence, he was informed, secondhand, not even directly, that his suggestions had been vetoed by higher-ups with no racing background, no engineering credentials, and no explanation beyond bureaucratic dismissal. This was more than a disagreement, it was a tipping point. For Verstappen, who places extraordinary value on loyalty, transparency, and follow-through, this represented a fundamental breach of the relationship. He reportedly told Confidants that this was the moment he realized the organization was no longer working with him, but around him, treating his voice not as an asset, but as a threat to existing power structures. Marco's dismissive comments, allegedly calling Verstappen's feedback an emotional overreaction, were seen not just as patronizing, but as evidence that Red Bull's inner circle had become resistant to evolution, trapped in a feedback loop where critique was viewed as insubordination and innovation as disruption. Verstappen didn't explode publicly. He didn't lash out in interviews or slam doors in the garage. What he did was far more calculated, and far more telling. He began to emotionally detach. He reduced his exposure to key figures, requested more private debriefs, surrounded himself with a tighter, more loyal inner circle. He began asking questions he hadn't considered before, about long-term vision, about structural independence, about what kind of team culture he truly wanted to be part of for the next phase of his career. Conversations that once would have been unthinkable started to happen behind closed doors. Not with the press. Not with fans. But with other teams. With people he once viewed as rivals. And what was once loyalty began to morph into leverage. Max Verstappen has never been a political animal in the traditional Formula One sense. He doesn't maneuver behind people's backs. He doesn't leak to the press to score points. He deals in performance, in numbers, in results. But even the most focused driver cannot operate in an environment where his authority is undermined, his instincts questioned, his expertise undervalued. And when that environment begins to feel not just uncooperative but hostile, even the most loyal warrior starts to look for a new kingdom. What's unfolding now is not simply a contract drama or a media frenzy. It is the unraveling of what was supposed to be a dynastic partnership. It is the fallout of trust broken in places the cameras never see. It's the slow, painful realization that even a team built around brilliance can lose its way when it stops listening to the very person it depends on most. And while the rest of the paddock speculates about lap times and silly season rumors, what's really happening behind the scenes is a rupture so deep, so personal, and so quietly devastating, that the consequences could reshape not only Verstappen's future, but the identity of Red Bull racing itself. The moment that broke the bond, the fracture that would ripple through the very core of Red Bull racing, wasn't a dramatic clash in front of the cameras, nor a fiery radio exchange broadcast to millions. No, it was far more subtle, far more insidious, and for Max Verstappen, far more personal. The Dutchman, who had built his legacy lap by lap with sheer grit, precision, and unmatched instinct, didn't just carry the team on his shoulders, he was the team. Or so he believed. Until, in hushed conversations, whispered through backchannels and relayed by trusted intermediaries, Max discovered something that would ignite a firestorm inside him. Red Bull, the very empire he had bled for, had quietly begun entertaining talks with another elite driver. Not publicly, not officially, but secretly and strategically. A high-level approach. A discreet feeler. A probe disguised as due diligence. They framed it as keeping options open, a contingency plan. But for Max, it was a betrayal. A knife in the back. A signal that no matter his past, his loyalty, his 3 world championships, he was no longer untouchable. He was replaceable. Disposable. And that was unforgivable. He didn't confront them, not yet. He didn't storm into Horner's office or demand a meeting. He didn't make a scene. Instead, Verstappen did what few expected. He went silent. Cold. Calculating. And he opened a door in his mind that had previously been bolted shut. A door labeled exit. The doubt that Red Bull had planted with that single act of disloyalty began to grow roots. What else were they hiding? How long had they been planning a future without him? If they could speak to other drivers behind closed doors, what was stopping him from doing the same? Nothing. And that's when Toto Wolff saw his moment. The approach wasn't random. It wasn't hasty. It was executed with the precision of a grandmaster. Wolff had been watching, waiting, analyzing every crack in the Red Bull armor. And when the tension peaked, when Max was emotionally adrift but still too proud to show it, Toto acted. No press. No leaks. No careless text messages. Just an elegantly crafted invitation, an offer to join him for a quiet escape during the Monaco off-week. On paper, a simple retreat. A breather. In reality, the groundwork for a seismic shift in Formula One's power structure. The location was deliberate. Sardinia. Far enough from the noise of the paddock to offer real privacy, yet intimate enough to feel exclusive. There, on a sleek, ultra-private yacht docked under the Mediterranean sun, the meeting that could redefine an era quietly unfolded. Max arrived with his manager, Raymond Vermeulen, and a small, carefully vetted entourage. Everyone had their role. Everyone knew the stakes. What followed wasn't a relaxed conversation over wine. It was a strategic unveiling. A pitch. A vision. And it came with receipts. Toto didn't just talk about ambition, he showed it. Mercedes' 2026 roadmap was presented in crystal-clear detail. Not vague hopes. Not slogans. Data. Timelines. Simulations. Aerodynamic projections. Wind tunnel findings. Engine development milestones broken down phase by phase. Max wasn't just told what could happen, he was shown what will happen. Confidential internal reports laid out how Mercedes had been relentlessly preparing for the next regulation cycle. And then came the knockout, the direct comparison. Projected output metrics. Drag coefficients. Thermal efficiency models. Mercedes' next-generation power unit, already deep into testing, versus Red Bull's Ford-branded powertrain. The results were staggering. The gap wasn't marginal. It was decisive. Mercedes wasn't hoping to catch up. They were planning to leap ahead. By miles. Sources close to the meeting claim Max barely spoke at first. He listened. Absorbed. His silence wasn't disinterest, it was calculation. He was processing a future he had never truly allowed himself to imagine. A future in which he wore silver. In which he led Mercedes back to dominance. In which he left Red Bull in the rearview mirror, not out of revenge, but evolution. What hit him hardest, perhaps, was that Mercedes wasn't just offering speed. They were offering respect. Total control. A team built around him. No shadows. No politics. No backroom whispers about replacements. Just a blank canvas, and the best tools in the sport to paint his next masterpiece. For a driver who had just been made to feel like a question mark at his current team, the message was clear: at Mercedes, he would be the answer. When the meeting ended, there were no handshakes promising the future. No contracts. No commitments. But there didn't need to be. The seed had been planted. The ground had shifted. And for the first time since his debut, Max Verstappen was seriously considering walking away from the team that had shaped his entire F1 identity. The betrayal had broken the illusion of permanence. The presentation had offered a new purpose. And the man who once seemed like he would retire in Red Bull blue might just be destined for silver. Max Verstappen, a man whose presence alone can shift the balance of the Formula One universe, didn't speak much during that pivotal meeting, not out of disinterest, but out of intent. Every silence from him wasn't an absence of engagement, but rather a calculation, an analysis, a weighing of the stakes. His eyes, locked on the faces across from him, absorbed every word like a radar, mapping motivations, dissecting tone, understanding not just what was being said, but what wasn't. The questions he did ask weren't rhetorical or padded with niceties. They were precise, pointed, sharp like a scalpel. There was no performance, no grandstanding, no need to flex. Max didn't have to prove who he was. They already knew. Everyone in that room knew. That's why they were there. And that's why the offer they eventually laid on the table wasn't just big, it was seismic. When the financial figure emerged, Euro 130 million per season, guaranteed, no bonuses, no targets, no ifs or maybes, just raw, unconditional commitment. It wasn't the number that caught Max's attention. He's had numbers before. He's turned down riches from companies who didn't understand him, didn't respect the silence behind his intensity. But this was different. This was a statement. Not just of wealth, but of worth. A message delivered not in words, but in action. A team telling him, "You are not just our hope. You are our cornerstone. Our North Star. Our axis." And for the first time during that entire meticulous, tension-filled encounter, something cracked through the steely facade. A smile. Subtle. Brief. But unmistakable. The kind of smile that tells you everything you need to know. It didn't escape anyone's notice. Least of all the crew serving on board that luxurious vessel moored in Sardinia's pristine waters. One of them, just a shadow moving drinks from hand to hand, later recalled, that was the only time he looked genuinely excited. Or maybe it was satisfied. Like something locked into place inside his head. The deal didn't win him over, the way they offered it did. Because this wasn't just about racing. This wasn't about contracts or trophies. It was about identity. It was about a driver being recognized not as a product of a dominant car or a winning machine, but as the singular force capable of dragging greatness into being by sheer will. The final evening didn't unfold like a corporate negotiation. It was almost cinematic in its intimacy. No press. No agents whispering over each other. Just quiet voices, laughter that came more freely now, clinking glasses under a moonlit sky, and a deal that would send shockwaves through the sport long before it ever became public. The informal but binding pre-contract was brought out with no drama, just gravity. A document that guaranteed Verstappen a seat at Mercedes should he choose to walk away from Red Bull before the conclusion of the 2025 season. Every word, every clause, every promise already etched in agreement hours before, it was now simply about making it real. Executing the intent. And when it came time to sign, there were no plastic pens, no tech-savvy digital signatures. It was personal. Symbolic. Raw. Wolf reached into his jacket, pulled out his own Mont Blanc pen, the one he uses only when things matter, and handed it to Max. No assistants, no middlemen. Just two men facing each other with an understanding that what they were building wasn't temporary. It wasn't transactional. It was a future. When the ink hit the paper, time seemed to pause, as if the ocean itself was holding its breath. What followed wasn't a press conference or an announcement. It was a moment shared in complete privacy. A toast. A bottle of 2003 Dom Perignon uncorked not for celebration, but for ceremony. For significance. Two glasses filled. Hands met. Not in a forced corporate handshake, but something more ancient. A pact. A gesture that said, "We begin here. This is where everything shifts. This is where the next chapter doesn't just start, it erupts." And Max, standing with the stars overhead, the water calm around him, didn't need to say much. But what he did say cut through the night like a blade. Simple. Direct. Unmistakable. This is the beginning of something real. Words that carried no exaggeration. Just truth. And with that, the lines of destiny began to redraw themselves. Quietly. Boldly. Irrevocably. Meanwhile, within the high-security walls of Red Bull Racing's Milton Keynes headquarters, the tension is no longer just palpable, it's corrosive. Beneath the glossy surface of PR statements and sponsor obligations, a quiet panic has begun to take root and metastasize into every department, every corridor, every strategy meeting. It's the kind of slow-burning chaos that doesn't announce itself with alarm bells or public meltdowns, but with whispers behind closed doors, hurried glances in engineering briefings, and boardroom silences heavy with unspoken truths. The departure of Christian Horner, once seen as the nuclear option, was supposed to hit the reset button, an emergency maneuver designed to project a sense of control and decisiveness. The Austrians at the helm believed that removing him would plug the leak, that his absence would restore calm, realign loyalties, and send a signal to Max Verstappen that the team was willing to do whatever it took to keep him. But that calculation was fatally naive. They underestimated just how deep the cracks had already spread. What they mistook for a quick fix has proven to be a bandage over a bullet wound. The truth? Verstappen's frustration isn't superficial. It isn't about egos or politics. It's about performance, vision, trust. And all three have been crumbling faster than anyone dares admit. Once Adrian Newey walked away from the project, the very mind that had engineered multiple championships and redefined aerodynamic excellence, it wasn't just a loss of talent. It was a spiritual gut punch. Newey was the creative soul of Red Bull's golden era, the genius who turned theory into untouchable speed. Without him, the team hasn't just lost innovation, it's lost identity. The RB chassis no longer breathes with that same elegant ferocity. The upgrades are slower. The concepts are more conservative. The aura of technical invincibility has faded. And Verstappen, the driver who once made even the impossible look effortless, now sees a future shrouded in uncertainty. He may still wear the Red Bull overalls. He may still speak to the media in carefully filtered soundbites. But emotionally, mentally, competitively, he's already halfway out the door. And everyone around him knows it. You can feel it in the way his body language has shifted, in the sharper tone of his post-race interviews, in the subtle lack of patience during briefings. The psychological link that once made Red Bull and Verstappen the most fearsome duo in modern motorsport has been severed, and no reshuffling of personnel or internal memos can bring it back. To complicate matters further, George Russell's looming arrival is generating more anxiety than optimism. Red Bull has tried to spin it as a new chapter, a fresh beginning, a continuation of excellence. But the truth is, even within their own walls, there is an unspoken awareness that this is not a like-for-like replacement. Russell is fast. He is intelligent. He is ruthless when needed. But he does not come with the gravitas of Max Verstappen. He does not carry the weight of 4 world championships, the psychological dominance, or the aura that causes entire grids to second-guess their own strategies the moment he lines up beside them. He is not a franchise driver. Not yet. And now he walks into a garage still stained with the emotional fallout of a departing icon. The pressure to immediately deliver, to seamlessly adapt to an environment fractured by internal politics and technical regression, will be suffocating. Every lap he completes will be compared to what Max would have done in the same situation. Every mistake will be magnified. Every misstep weaponized. There will be no grace period, no margin for error. He is walking into a lion's den still echoing with the roar of the king who just walked away. And while the media circus is only now preparing to explode with headlines, speculation, and hot takes, the real players, the decision-makers, the stakeholders, the architects of power within the F1 ecosystem, have already seen the writing on the wall. They know what's about to unfold. They've read the briefings, analyzed the data, connected the dots. They've known for months. What Mercedes has pulled off isn't just a signing. It's a masterstroke, a strategic ambush that could go down as the most audacious power play in the history of the sport's modern era. In an age of data-driven margins and long-term planning, Mercedes has made the ultimate statement not with wind tunnel upgrades or simulator hours, but with a name: Max Verstappen. The driver who doesn't just win races, he erases doubt. He demolishes rivals. He alters destinies. And now, that weapon belongs to them. This isn't just about rebuilding. This isn't about bouncing back. This is about domination. This is about reclaiming the throne not with hope, but with inevitability. Toto Wolff and the Mercedes Brain Trust haven't just added another driver to the roster. They've secured the one man capable of single-handedly rewriting the competitive balance of the sport. And they did it under everyone's noses, while Red Bull's leadership was distracted by infighting and denial. With Verstappen now in Silver Arrows black, the message to the rest of the grid is deafening. They're not just coming back. They're coming to annihilate. Not eventually. Not someday. Now. And everyone else? They're already playing catch-up. Red Bull is no longer the confident, dominant powerhouse it once appeared to be. Behind the sharp lines of their garage and the polished soundbites from senior management, there's a growing sense of panic, raw, unfiltered, and inescapable. They're not just reacting late, they're reacting blindly. The so-called groundbreaking offer they've extended to Max Verstappen, handing him the rights to name a sister team, a once unthinkable concession, is now being viewed across the paddock not as visionary leadership but as a glaring sign of desperation. A final, frantic attempt to stop the inevitable. A flimsy last-ditch lifeline thrown toward a driver who, in all but name, has already walked away. This isn't just a negotiation gone wrong. This is the unraveling of a dynasty. What was once Red Bull's fortress is now full of uncertainty, riddled with confusion, and shaken by internal division. The paddock feels it. The engineers feel it. Even the mechanics, those who used to chant Max's name with pride, are beginning to ask quiet questions in the shadows of the paddock tents. The tide is turning. What used to be a tightly controlled empire ruled with clarity and dominance has become a battlefield of conflicting agendas and hurried decisions, with one driver's looming departure threatening to collapse everything they've worked so hard to build. Verstappen has already moved on emotionally, psychologically, professionally. His mind is elsewhere. His focus is no longer on defending Red Bull's legacy, it's on creating his own. His inner circle has wasted no time in laying the groundwork for what promises to be the most ambitious personal brand transformation Formula One has ever seen. Meetings with global media corporations are already taking place. Merchandising blueprints are being reviewed by marketing juggernauts. Licensing agreements are quietly being finalized. His lawyers, agents, and image consultants are drawing the borders of a new empire, an empire not wearing Red Bull blue, but dressed head to toe in Mercedes silver. While Red Bull scrambles to stitch together temporary patches, Mercedes has been building something far more calculated, far more strategic. Their operation isn't just about bringing in Verstappen, it's about giving him something Red Bull never truly could: complete institutional backing, a co-authorship in history, and the opportunity to shape a future dynasty from the ground up. They're not pitching him a car, they're offering him an ecosystem, a legacy vehicle, a global platform engineered with the same precision they apply to their race strategy. And Verstappen has said yes, not with a press release, not yet, but with a silent signature on a pre-contract that will go down as one of the most consequential moments in the modern era of the sport. In the shadows of that decision, the implications are spreading like wildfire. Sponsors are already making moves, with many re-evaluating long-term contracts and shifting their focus toward this new alliance. Brands that once fought to associate themselves with Red Bull are now sending quiet feelers to Mercedes, eager to align with the Verstappen name as it expands into something far beyond a mere racing brand. The Verstappen identity is becoming something transcendent, no longer confined to the cockpit, no longer just about pole positions and race wins. He's transforming into a full-spectrum enterprise, global icon, cultural ambassador, and marketing juggernaut. His influence now stretches beyond the boundaries of the track and into boardrooms, editorial decisions, and entertainment deals. He's no longer just a champion, he's becoming a brand, a symbol, a movement. And as this tidal wave crashes forward, the old rules of Formula One are being swept away. The sport is shifting under our feet. The very foundation of how drivers and teams relate to each other is being rewritten in real time. Traditional contracts, with their rigid clauses and team-first structures, are now relics of the past. Max has opened a door that others will follow. Drivers will no longer be just employees, they'll be collaborators, partners, stakeholders. The leverage Verstappen has carved out will redefine the power dynamics of Formula One for generations. Team principals will be forced to rethink every facet of their operations, not just in terms of performance but in terms of influence, branding, and long-term vision. There are hushed conversations happening in every hospitality unit, every VIP suite, every media center. Senior figures speak in coded language, but the message is clear: nothing will ever be the same. The Verstappen-Mercedes axis isn't just a transfer, it's a revolution. And as with every revolution, some will rise, others will fall, and many will never see it coming until it's far too late. Red Bull, for all its engineering brilliance and marketing prowess, suddenly looks like a team that's lost control of its destiny. And the most painful part? They never saw it slipping through their fingers. They believed the wins would be enough. That loyalty was eternal. That Max would never walk away from the house he helped build. But empires fall fastest when they believe they're invincible. George Russell has already begun making arrangements. Quietly, professionally, respectfully. The move to Milton Keynes is no longer hypothetical, it's real. He's clearing the way, stepping aside, playing the long game with a poise that speaks volumes. He knows what's coming. Everyone does. The paddock is holding its breath for the official announcement. Every day feels like the calm before a seismic storm. The countdown has begun. The contracts are drafted. The statements are being prepared. Mercedes is ready. Max is ready. And Red Bull? They're sitting in silence, staring at a future that looks nothing like the past they fought to create. Their greatest weapon is slipping away, and with him, perhaps the very soul of their golden era. The noise is getting louder. The pressure is mounting. And the question everyone's afraid to say out loud is now the only one that matters. How did it all unravel so fast? The answer is coming. And when it arrives, it will change everything.